Hi everybody, it's Lou Sims from Lou Sims Paper Crafter, and this is day 2 of my Halloween extravaganza, I suppose I'm going to use that word. And I'm using lots of Halloween inspired products from Polkadoodles. So I'm going to be using this stamp set, which is fabulous. I'm going to be using the Trick or Treat papers, plus I'm going to be using a stencil to create one of my backgrounds. Now this stencil came out last year for Christmas, so it just goes to show you that not everything for Christmas needs to be for Christmas. So let's get all the little bits and pieces together and I'll explain what I'm going to do. So I'm going to move my stamp set. Right, I have die cut a lot of the parts in advance because I think most people know how to use a die cutting machine. So I've used two different types of the Polkadoodles dies, the circle dies. I think there's 3 sets now all in all, and they all work with each other in slightly different ways. So I've got my circle layers. I've obviously done my clouds. They're also from a Polkadoodles die. My card, and I've stamped out Frankie already. Now on my card here, as you can see, Frankie's head moves, so he just wobbles. Now however much you want to make him move, it's up to you. I mean, you can make him move a lot more than I'm doing. You could even put a little spring underneath there, or you could just decoupage him up. The choice is yours, but I think it's nice just to have a little bit of movement in the card. So let's begin. Right, so let's start with our background first. So we've got our 2 circles to make our circle blank. Now, what I normally try and do is I will glue a small portion across the top and put that on the bottom. Along the top there. And I trim just a small amount off the back there, parallel to my gluing line. Okay, but we'll do that one later. But let's get on with the card itself. So I'm just going to put, well, I don't know why I'm putting that one to one side, but hey ho. So on the circle here, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but a lot of the dies from Polkadoodles have beautiful either stitching to it or lovely little tiny little dots in there. So we're going to take advantage of that. I mean, because obviously Frankie was made up of different parts, so he was stitched together. So I'm just going to create some faux stitching. I'm using a white pen. I'm hoping I've shaken it up. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow where they are. Now, I'm not going to be overly precise. So if I come off and go back, I'm going to do that because I want to make it appear that like it's a stitched line, just like Frankie. So we'll just go back. And then I'm just going to add some mock stitching in different places that I'd like it to be. You don't have to do this if you didn't want to. You could emboss around the edges. So that is just my background layer. So all I've done is added my faux stitching. I'm just going to put that to one side. And I'm going to do exactly the same with one of the backing papers, which I've cut also out from one of the circle dies. But this one has tiny little dots, little piercings around the edge. And I'm going to follow that. But this time round, I'm going to use a black pen. So again, all I'm going to do is just follow the dots. I'm trying not to be too precise. So it doesn't matter if you miss some of the holes. You could go back over, like I've missed a couple there. I could go back over and make it look even more like it's randomly stitched together. It's just to give an effect. And as all those dots are there, piercings are there, we might as well use them. I'm going to do the same again. I'm just going to add some little bits of stitching here and there around. And there, and then I'm just going to highlight some of them with the white so they stand out a little bit more. You could, if you wanted to, if you've got with your white pen, is go over some of the line like that and add another little bit of sewing line if you want to, but you don't have to. So that is my background layer, and I'm going to stick it so it sits slightly down on there, so I can see some of my stitching around the outside. So let's stick that in place, and then we'll move that to one side. Okay. I'm just going to try and make sure I squidge the glue to the outside so it gets caught underneath. So that's the basis of my background. So I'm just going to move that to one side, and the clouds, I'll put my pens out of the way, and I'm going to start using the circle. I'm just going to get a piece of scrap paper just to put it on for the moment, and I'm going to use the circle part of this stencil because obviously the card is circular. I just thought that using a stencil with circles on would be just as good. If you're worried about going over your edges and some of the other design coming through, just mask them off. You don't have to, I mean, yeah, so you just mask them off. I'm not sticking it down to the circle, it's just that then I don't pick up the stars or the trees. And I'm just going to do a mixture of distress inks again, and I'm using mustard seed and the spice marmalade, and I'm just going to add some of the circles to the background. So all I've done is created the illusion of all the bubbles to match in. I'm just going to now quickly go round the edge, but I'm not going to add much more ink. I'm just going to use what's left on my pad. So that's my background plate done. And I'm going to do the same as I did before with the other circles. And I'm just going to go round with a black pen, as you can see, and I'm just following the little pierced holes. And as before, I'm not worried if I, go off, and I'm just going to add some faux stitching. You can do that as much or as little as you want. And I'm just going to add 1 or 2 white highlights. Okay. Now, on my background card here, I've got the bats and I've got the spider. I'm going to add them afterwards. Now, I know there's a risk to doing that because if you go wrong, you go wrong. But you can always stamp something else from the collection and just cover it. So that's that one there. And while I've got my ink pads out, I might as well do the clouds. Another thing you could do is you could cut the clouds from the backing paper. So if I really wanted dark and moody clouds, I could cut them from that beautiful damask paper, the darker grey, or even from the Polkadoodles, the spotty purple one. So there, my clouds all ready to go. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start colouring Frankie. So I'm just going to get my pens together and I'll be back shortly. Okay, I've got my pens, so we'll just make a start. I'm going to say now I don't colour in any particular way, i.e. light coming from the top, the bottom or whatever. I just colour as I like to see an image. And I put little bits of shading in just where I want to have little bits of shading. So I'm going to start colouring these up and I will fast forward. Okay, that's my Frankie done. I didn't technically need to colour the other face as much as I wanted to, but it gives me a reference of what I wanted to do next. Also, if I now want to put him flat, I've got the face covered. All I had to really do was just go around the outside edge, because that's, you're going to see a little bit from there. So I'm going to put the pens away, and then I'm going to gather everything together, and then we'll talk about making the actual card. Right, everything's tidied away, we can get going again. So this is my card front, and quick recap, we've just doodled around the outside because we've got all that wonderful faux stitching already built in, so we've just highlighted it. This is going to be my panel for Frankie to sit on, but now I've got some of the clouds, so what I want to do is I want to tuck the clouds in different locations, so they're going to sit there like that, and I think we'll have another sitting there like that with Frankie being on there, okay, and then his second head being there, which suits the idea of, you know, Frankie being stitched together. So what we'll do is we'll move Frankie and we'll just get the clouds in place, and then we can add a few more of the other stamped images to it. So I'm just going to move that part out and then just stick the first part down. So if I look at my circle, so that I can have that there. And then I'm going to have a lower one there. And then this one is going to actually be on the panel itself. So we can now start adding some of the bat elements to the actual card. And oh, she says, thinking that she got it all out. And the little bat is part of the Hey Pumpkin. So and I can have a bat there. I'll have one at the top. And let's have one here. Right. Now the reason the bat image hasn't come out is that's where there's some stitching actually on the die cut. If it bothers you, go over with a black pen. Okay. The choice is yours. All right, let's stick this circle down. Right, I'll put my rubbish over there. So I'm just going to put where I put the darker shading slightly at the top. And I can put that on. Now this cloud is going to go about there, because I want to still be able to see the bat and a little bit of the stitching. Yeah, that looks okay. I'll put it there. Now I'm going to stamp a few more of the bat images in place with my ink lid. And I want to do one under there, so I'm just going to squidge a little bit of double-sided foam so I can get that flat there. And let's do, let's put another bit. Okay, so that's my bats in place with my foam. Now also what I've done on my previous card was I used some of the little spider and made my own spider's web, and he's on the Fab-BOO-lous stamp set, and here he is. You do get a little spider's web as well on that set, but I just want the little spider by himself. So let's ink him up. And I'm going to have him, oh, let's borrow my foam again. I know it's not always good to add the little bits after you've done it. You know, you've stuck it all down. But sometimes there's only so much planning ahead, and I think a card develops as you're going along as well. And so needs must. So I'm going to put that spider there. So there's my spiders. Let's just move them out of the way. So that's the background. So Frankie is then going to sit there with his head on top. All right. Now we need to stamp the sentiment, but before I do that, I'm just going to take my white pen, because it takes a little bit of time to dry because it's a white paint pen, and I'm just going to want to add some little eyes onto the bats. Sorry, Frankie, let's move you. Like that. And I'm going to add some eyes onto the spider. I'm going to have one big eye and one little one. And this one, I think he can have 3 eyes. Okay. And we might as well add the spidery web, which is coming down from the cloud. And this one is. So they're in place there. So as I said, if that bothers you, you could always get your black pen and colour it out. I'm not fussed. So that's the background done. So what we need to do now is we need to stamp up our sentiment. And I'm going to do the Your Fab-BOO-lous, which is from the same stamp set. Because actually, Frankie is very fabulous. So my sentiment is going to sit there. I want to see my spiders. And then Frankie will sit on top. So we'll just glue that in place. And put that there. You could put a foam pad underneath that if that's what you wanted to do, just to make it secure, but I'm not really overly worried. So I'm just going to stick Frankie in place. Oh, I don't stick him to, and I want him, let's put him there. I'm just going to quickly wipe my hand on my cloth. There we go. So he's in place there. Now, for the wibbly wobbly bit, I literally just took a scrap piece of card and I just created a concertina. I mean, you could use your what they're called, scoring tools if you wanted to. I just did my own thing. There we go. Cut away. So now I've just created a little spring, a little coil. It's how high you want the face, we'll say how high you, ooh, did spring off, how high you actually want your coil to be. So if you want it quite low down, you would trim more away than less. So for example, if I have him there and I stick the head on, the head stands out quite a long way. So I will just take, let's just take 2 off. Well, that wasn't the best bit of cutting, never mind. There we go. So that's sitting there. Also, gosh, it's got a life of its own. I've got that facing towards me, so that means Frankie's head will tilt back. So you need to think of which direction you're going to sit your coil. So if I've got this bit with the cut edge going away from me, Frankie's head will sit that way. So just think about how you want it. I mean, it doesn't really matter. And we're just going to stick it down. I can put it smack bang in the middle. Let's move that out of the way. I'm going to roughly line it up. I'm just going to hold my finger in place for the moment until the glue just takes. And as you can see, and because of the way I've positioned it, Frankie's head is now coming towards me, if that makes sense. If I'd have turned it around the other way, it would have gone that way. So Frankie's head is now coming towards me. So he actually has a little bit of movement, and you can flick him and make him move. On my original card, what I've done is I've added 2. I don't know whether you can see. I'm trying to see. I've added 2 little concertinas. So the face stays quite flat. And on this one, I've just added the 1 so the face sits forward. If that's too much for you, glue one of the other little parts down and the face won't be quite standing out. But I quite like that. Right, let's find our back of our card. And move that. So we've got the back of our card. And as I said before, I do like a gluing line along the top. Now you can use red liner. You could use, whatever suits you at the end of the day. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my block and I'm just going to draw a straight line, as you can see there, and that's going to be above that line is where I'll actually glue. And because I can line my block up to that line, I can now draw a line down the bottom. So I now know that line is parallel to that line. And then when I trim it, I know that that will be the right place for it to go. So if I glue it together, I prefer to use glue, than red liner tape, but that's personal preference again. Now the only other thing you've got to do, sorry, I'm wrestling with my glue in the background here, is make sure that this is lined up. So I'm just going to take my block. I'll bring it up. I hope I'm in line. My block is roughly straight to where I want to cut, which means then I can line up my sentiment with the block, and they're roughly parallel, and I can glue this bit down. So I'm just going to grab this and hold it in place. And once the glue's gone off, I just add a score line along the top there to make it open. But I prefer to do that after. Some people prefer to do it beforehand. I prefer to do it after, just in case I got a little bit overzealous with the gluing. Right, Frankie. Oh, I could make you curved a little bit more, actually. And then what I would do as well, once that is stuck in place, is I'd trim along the bottom. Now, I wouldn't trim as much as I've marked, but I've got a line that I can actually use. And that now means, once I've done the score line, that my card will stand up. It's not going to stand at the moment because I've done no score line, but that means the back gives it somewhere to stand up. Right, so that's my actual card, and that's using lots and lots of elements from the Fab-BOO-lous stamp. I've just used one or two. I think the back came from another stamp set. So I hope you enjoyed that. So that's day 2 of the Polkadoodles Halloween extravaganza, she says. I'll be back for day 3 and I'll have another different project, but tomorrow's project will be linked to the monster stamps. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed that. Leave any comments or any questions you have below. As always, I'll link below, but I'll also link to my blog just in case you don't want to wade through all the YouTubey blurby blurby blur bits. Okay, thank you again for watching.